Welcome to Olivia Tales. Please don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's begin. It was a chilly morning in late October. The kind where the air smelled faintly of wood smoke, and every breath came out in a soft mist. Emily Carson walked into Maple and Pine Cafe, the little coffee shop she often passed on her way to work but rarely had the time to stop in. She had taken the day off, a small act of rebellion against the never-ending demands of her office job. She ordered a latte, found a quiet corner near the window, and pulled out her notebook. Writing was her secret comfort, though she rarely showed anyone her words. She simply liked putting her thoughts down, even if they stayed hidden forever. The bell above the cafe door rang, and in walked Daniel Hayes. Emily didn't know his name yet, but she noticed him almost instantly. He was in his late 40s, maybe 50, dressed neatly but not to formal, dark sweater, jeans, a worn leather satchel slung over his shoulder. He looked like someone who carried both stories and silences inside him. He ordered black coffee, then scanned the room. All the tables were taken except for the empty chair across from Emily. "Excuse me," he said politely, his voice calm, carrying a certain warmth. "Would you mind if I sit here?" Emily hesitated. She wasn't used to strangers sitting at her table, but then she nodded. Of course. Daniel sat down, offering a grateful smile. For a while, they both sipped their coffee in silence, the kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just unspoken. But eventually, he noticed her notebook. "Are you a writer?" he asked. Emily laughed softly, a little embarrassed. "Not really, just thoughts. Nothing special." Daniel tilted his head. "I think writing down thoughts is one of the bravest things a person can do. It means you're willing to listen to yourself." Something about his words made Emily's chest tighten. She wasn't used to strangers seeing through her so quickly. They began to talk. At first about simple things: coffee, the weather, the charm of small cafes. But then the conversation drifted deeper, as if guided by some unseen thread. He told her he was a history professor at the local university, recently divorced, trying to find his footing again. She admitted she often felt invisible in her office job, where her efforts went unnoticed. Daniel listened intently, not just nodding, but really hearing her. And Emily, who usually guarded her feelings, found herself speaking more openly than she ever expected. One line he said lingered. "Sometimes life brings us to the right place at the exact moment we need it, whether we realize it or not." Emily stared at him, unsure why those words touched her so deeply. It felt like a quiet reminder she didn't even know she was waiting for. The cafe had grown busier, yet their table felt like its own small world. She noticed how his eyes, soft gray, thoughtful, seemed to carry both sorrow and kindness, and she wondered why she felt drawn to him, a man she'd only just met. But then Daniel glanced at his watch, and his expression shifted slightly, as if reality had just tapped him on the shoulder. "I should go," he said, standing up slowly. He looked at her for a moment, hesitating. Then he added, almost carefully, "I hope this won't be the last time we talk." Emily's lips parted, but she didn't know what to say. Her heart raced, torn between caution and curiosity, and before she could answer, he smiled gently, picked up his satchel, and walked out into the crisp autumn air, leaving Emily staring at the door, notebook open, latte half finished, and her thoughts more restless than ever. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up her pen. On the blank page, she wrote only one sentence. Why did it feel like more than just coffee? Emily sat in the cafe long after Daniel had gone, staring at the words she had written in her notebook. Why did it feel like more than just coffee? She didn't usually let people slip past her guard so easily. Normally, conversations stayed polite, safe, yet something about Daniel had been different. He spoke with a sincerity she hadn't felt in a long time. His words still lingered like a quiet echo in her mind. That night, as she lay in bed, she replayed the meeting over and over. She didn't even know why she cared so much. Maybe it was the way he listened. Or maybe it was simply that he noticed her, really noticed her, in a way she wasn't used to. Days passed. Work swallowed her time again, emails stacking up, meetings draining her energy. But even in the middle of deadlines, Emily found her thoughts drifting back to that small cafe, to that gride professor who had looked at her like she mattered. By the end of the week, she did something unusual for her. She went back to Maple and Pine Cafe on Saturday morning. She told herself it was just for coffee, just for the quiet atmosphere, but a quiet part of her wondered if she might see him again. The cafe was busy, the soft hum of conversation blending with the hiss of the espresso machine. She ordered her latte and sat at the same corner table. She opened her notebook, though her hand barely moved. Her eyes kept glancing toward the door. Minutes passed, and then the bell above the door rang. Daniel walked in. Emily's heart jumped before she could stop it. He looked surprised when his eyes found hers, but then his surprise softened into a smile. He ordered his black coffee, and just like before, he walked over. "May I?" he asked. Emily nodded, feeling her pulse quicken. "Of course." This time, the conversation picked up more easily. They spoke about books, about places they both wanted to travel, about the small joys that made days bearable. Emily discovered that Daniel loved photography, though he rarely shared his pictures. He discovered that Emily had once dreamed of becoming a novelist but had set that dream aside for the safety of office work at one point. Their hands brushed accidentally as they both reached for the sugar jar. The touch was brief, but it lingered in Emily's chest longer than it should have. There were moments of silence, but not the awkward kind moments where words weren't needed, and Emily realized that she didn't feel like she was talking to a stranger anymore. She felt seen, but just as the morning began to feel timeless, Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, and his face changed. Something unreadable flickered there. He quickly silenced it, but Emily noticed. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. He hesitated. "It's complicated. Just something I need to handle." She wanted to ask more, but she didn't. She respected the quiet weight in his tone. Instead, she offered a small nod, letting the moment settle. After a while, he leaned back and looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "You know, Emily," he said slowly, "sometimes conversations happen that shift something inside us. I think this might be one of them." Her breath caught. She wanted to ask him what he meant, but the words wouldn't form. And then, before she could gather her courage, he stood. "I should go, but I'd like to see you again." Emily felt her lips curve into a nervous smile. "I'd like that too." As he walked away, the same ache filled her chest as before, something between curiosity and longing. She didn't know what this was, or what it might become, but she knew one thing. It wasn't just coffee anymore. That night, as she wrote in her notebook, she paused, tapped her pen, and finally wrote, "Some conversations don't just pass, they stay." She didn't know that Daniel, sitting alone in his apartment across town, was staring at his own phone, debating whether to call her, his heart wrestling with something he hadn't shared yet. The following week moved slowly, as though time itself had stretched in anticipation. Emily kept wondering if she'd hear from Daniel or if their meetings at the cafe were nothing more than chance. On Wednesday evening, after a particularly heavy day at work, she stopped by Maple and Pine Cafe again. It was almost instinct now, like the place held some quiet promise. She ordered her latte and settled into her corner seat. Notebook open but untouched. Minutes later, the bell above the door rang. And there he was. Daniel spotted her right away. His smile carried a warmth that made her chest flutter, though there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes. As if he hadn't been sure whether he should come. But he did, and soon, he was sitting across from her once more, coffee in hand. This time, their conversation flowed even more naturally. Emily found herself laughing at his subtle humor, and Daniel seemed lighter than before, less guarded. But as the talk deepened, Emily's curiosity grew. There was a shadow around him, something he wasn't saying. She noticed how he avoided questions about his past marriage, how his gaze sometimes drifted as though he was somewhere else entirely. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly, her pen resting idly on her notebook. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Of course. Why does it feel like you're holding something back?" He froze for a moment, the question hanging between them. Then he sighed, running a hand over his face. "You're right. I am." Emily's heart pounded. She didn't want to push, but she needed to understand. "You don't have to tell me," she whispered. "Not if it's too hard." Daniel looked at her, his gray eyes heavy with something unspoken. "It's not that I don't want to. It's complicated. My divorce wasn't just a separation. It was the breaking of a whole life I thought I had built. And I'm still figuring out who I am without it." Emily's chest ached at the honesty in his words. She could hear the quiet pain behind them. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "That must have been incredibly hard." Daniel nodded. "It was, still is." He paused, his voice softer now. "But meeting you, talking to you, it feels like a door I didn't expect to open." Emily felt her cheeks warm. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The cafe's chatter carried around them, but their table felt like its own world. Then Daniel leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Emily, I don't want to rush anything. I don't even know what this is, but I know it means something." Her pulse quickened at his words. She wanted to tell him she felt the same, that she hadn't been able to stop thinking about him, but the words stayed lodged in her throat. Just then, Daniel's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, and the same flicker of conflict crossed his face. This time, he turned it face down on the table, as if refusing to let it interrupt. Emily's curiosity deepened. Who kept calling him? What part of his life was reaching for him when he was with her? But before she could ask, Daniel looked at her with a softness that almost undid her. "Promise me one thing," he said quietly. "What's that?" "Don't think of this as just coffee anymore." Her breath caught, and for the first time, she let a smile break through the uncertainty. "I already don't." They sat there, smiling at each other, the moment stretching into something fragile and beautiful. But then, as Daniel finally stood to leave, Emily noticed the name that flashed briefly on his phone screen before he tucked it away. It wasn't a friend. It wasn't a colleague. It was a woman's name. And Emily suddenly realized there might be more to his story than he was letting her see. Emily couldn't shake what she had seen the name on Daniel's phone screen. It lingered in her mind long after he left the cafe, pressing against her thoughts like a stone she couldn't move. Who was she? A friend? Someone from his past? Or something more? She wanted to believe Daniel had been honest with her, that the connection they were building wasn't shadowed by secrets. But doubt crept in, whispering questions she didn't want to ask. That night, Emily sat at her desk with her notebook open, pen in hand. She tried to write, but the words refused to come. All she managed to scribble was, "Do we ever really know someone?" The following Saturday, she returned to Maple and Pine. Her heart beat faster with every step inside, her eyes scanning the room before she even ordered her drink. And when she saw him sitting near the window, already with a black coffee in hand, she felt both relief and hesitation. Daniel's face lit up when he saw her. He waved her over, and for a moment, all the worry she'd carried dissolved under the warmth of his smile. "Emily," he said as she sat down, "I was hoping you'd come." They talked, as always, with ease. He asked about her week, listened to her frustrations about work, and even shared a story from one of his lectures that had gone comically wrong. She laughed more than she expected, and once again, the cafe faded around them. But in the quiet spaces between their words, Emily couldn't ignore the flicker of doubt. Finally, when their laughter settled into silence, she spoke. "Daniel," she began softly, "can I ask you something?" His expression grew thoughtful. "Of course." She hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of her notebook. "The other day, when your phone rang, I saw a name, a woman's name. And she trailed off, unsure how to finish. Daniel's smile faded, replaced by a look that was hard to read, something between surprise and resignation. He leaned back slowly, running a hand across his jaw. "You noticed," he said quietly. Emily's chest tightened. "I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to invade your privacy. I just know." "Don't apologize," he interrupted gently. "You have every right to wonder." He paused, his gaze drifting out the window as though searching for the right words. "Her name is Claire. She's my ex-wife." The words hung heavy in the air. Emily's heart thudded. "She still calls sometimes," Daniel continued, his voice steady but low. "Not because we're together, those days are gone, but because untangling a life built over 20 years isn't simple. There are things we still have to discuss, responsibilities we can't ignore. It's messy." Emily studied his face. He wasn't avoiding her eyes now. He looked tired, but honest. "Why didn't you just tell me before?" she asked quietly. Daniel exhaled. "Because I didn't want you to think I was still caught in that world. I didn't want you to walk away before we even began." Something inside Emily softened at his words. Yet, another part of her still wavered. Was she stepping into someone else's unfinished story? She took a slow breath. "Daniel, I don't want to judge. I don't want to be in the middle of something unresolved." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, he nodded. "That's fair. More than fair. And the truth is, I don't want you to be either." Their eyes met across the table. For the first time, the air between them wasn't just filled with attraction, it was filled with a fragile honesty, the kind that could either bring them closer or push them apart. Daniel reached for his coffee, then stopped halfway, as if changing his mind. His voice was quiet, but certain. "Emily, I don't know where this is going, but I know I don't want to lose the chance to find out with you." Emily's heart swelled and twisted all at once. She wanted to believe him, wanted to step into the fragile hope he was offering, but a single question pressed against her chest, sharp and unrelenting. Could she trust him? The following days were heavy with thought. Emily carried Daniel's words with her everywhere, through the crowded trains, the office meetings, even in the quiet of her apartment. "I don't know where this is going, but I know I don't want to lose the chance to find out with you." They were beautiful words. But words weren't always enough. She had trusted before, only to find herself hurt. And yet, something about Daniel felt different. He hadn't promised perfection. He hadn't hidden his struggles anymore. He had simply been real. By Friday evening, Emily found herself walking toward Maple and Pine Cafe again. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in muted shades of orange and pink. Her steps were hesitant, her heart caught between hope and fear. When she entered, she saw him immediately. Daniel was sitting in their usual spot, a book open in front of him, though his eyes weren't moving across the page. When he noticed her, relief softened his face, as if he hadn't been sure she would come. "Emily," he said gently, standing as she approached. "Hi," she replied, her voice quiet. They sat across from each other, the familiar table between them. For a moment, silence filled the space, heavy but not unbearable. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Daniel admitted. "I wasn't sure either," Emily said honestly. He nodded slowly, accepting her words without defense. "But you did, and that means something." Emily looked at him, studying the man in front of her, the gray eyes that carried both sorrow and warmth, the careful way he chose his words, the quiet strength beneath his uncertainty. He wasn't perfect. His past was complicated, but so was hers, in different ways. "I don't need promises you can't keep," she said softly. "I just need honesty. If I can trust that, maybe the rest will come." Daniel's expression shifted: relief, gratitude, something tender and unspoken. "Then I'll give you honesty, even when it's hard." Emily felt something loosen in her chest. She hadn't realized how much she had needed to hear those words. They sat there for hours, the cafe slowly emptying around them. Their conversation wandered gently from their favorite books, to small childhood memories, to dreams they had tucked away for too long. With every word, the invisible wall between them grew thinner. At one point, Daniel reached across the table, resting his hand lightly over hers. His touch was steady, not demanding, just a quiet reassurance. Emily didn't pull away. Instead, she let her fingers curl slightly against his, the simple contact grounding her. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like," Daniel said softly, his voice almost a whisper, "but I know I'd like you to be in it." Emily's heart swelled. She thought of the first time they met, the quiet conversation that had felt like more than just coffee. And now, sitting here, she realized something. Sometimes, the most unexpected meetings were the ones that changed everything. She smiled, her eyes misting with emotion. "Then maybe tomorrow, we'll find out together." Outside, the evening deepened into night. The cafe lights glowed warm against the dark, framing to people who had stumbled into each other's lives by chance, only to discover that chance had given them something worth holding on to. It had started with coffee, but it had become so much more. The end.